into psychoanalysis, theory of ego, superego, and ID. At first it's hard to comprehend, but waiting just around the bend. Everywhere you look, everywhere, there's a mind, a hypothesis to hold on to. Everywhere you look, everywhere, there's a Freudian theory to study. When you're lost out there and you're all confused, Freud is waiting to carry you home. Everywhere you look. In the Czech Republic, born and raised in the universities where he spent most of his days, chilling out, laughing, researching all cool, analyzing some psyches outside of the school. When a couple of theories, they were so good, making innovations in the psych neighborhood. He formulated a few major theories like psychosexuality, unconscious mind, three-part personality. He went to Vienna, and when it came time, he got his diploma and a degree in medicine. If anything, we could say that this man was rare. His theories made Victorians think their minds would tear. He wrote a few papers, about 7 or 8, and yelled to the world, "My research is first rate." He looked at his kingdom, he was finally there to sit on his throne as the founder of psych.
Hello and welcome to the show, Anna. We are glad that you decided to answer a few questions about your father today.
Hi, and thanks for having me.
I understand that you and your father had a very close relationship.
Yes, my dad and I were very close. It started because I was different from the other girls in our family, and he liked that about me. I was more concerned about intellectual things and his work than I was with girly things. I loved and admired my father a lot. He meant so much to me. I consider myself to be blessed to have such an amazing dad. I refused to do anything without his approval. I even refused to marry or have kids because I didn't want to shame my father.
Many people say that you started your own psychology career under your father's wing and then refused to stray. Do you feel this is true?
I did start my career under my father's wing, and I helped him a lot with his research. Since I started my interest in psychology when I was only 14, my dad taught me a lot about it, and he also let me help with his research. Then, in 1924, when my father was sick due to his addiction and had cancer, I had to take over his research. While my research also involved my dad's theory of psychoanalysis, I managed to stray away and branch off due to my study of children.
Can you please explain you and your father's theory of psychoanalysis to the viewers?
Sure. Psychoanalysis was created by my dad, Sigmund Freud, and contained several concepts. The theory was divided into 3 sections. One was unconscious, one was conscious, and the other was preconscious. The theory mostly relies on the concept of unconscious. We believe that through things such as hypnosis and dream interpretation, one can access the unconscious. Lastly, we believe that the unconscious contains sexual drives, which means any form of pleasure derived from the body, which motivates our actions and our behavior in a positive or a negative way.
Thank you for that depth of description in your father's work. Now can you please explain your work and your father's influence on it?
Without my dad, I would have never been a psychologist. I started reading his books when I was 14, as I said before, and I had him analyze my dreams. Through helping him with his research, I learned what I needed to know about psychology in order to start my own career. He was such an influence on my life and research, and I loved him very much. He pushed me to join the International Psychology Congress and I chose to be a psychologist. My dad was the only person I loved in my family, and he was a great man, and I loved him and still love him dearly.
Thank you so much again. Thanks for coming on the show.
No problem. Hello, Sergey Pakinja. It's wonderful to have you on the show today. We are so glad you could come to share your inputs and opinions.
Surely, anything that you wish to know.
Alright, let's get started with our first question. Are you ready?
Certainly, I've been preparing all morning for these questions.
Okay, let's get started. How is it that the nickname Wolfman came about?
Well, a long while back, I was seeing a man named Sigmund Freud for counseling during a hard time in my life. To protect my identity, Freud named my case file Wolfman.
If it is not too much to ask, was it a hard time in your life when you needed Freud's specialties?
Within 2 years, I lost 2 immediate family members. First was my sister Anna, who sadly took her own life. I don't think I'll ever get over her loss. The next person was my father, who also took his life because he decided to take too many sleeping pills. So during that time, I was very depressed and it was a very dark time.
I'm so sorry to hear that. Back to the original question, why the name Wolfman?
I told Freud many things about my past. He used a lot of session time studying me. Over time, I told Freud of the dreams I had as a boy. I started off at nighttime and I was laying in bed. I know for sure it was winter when I had the dream and it was dark outside. My bed stood at the foot of the window and I could see a row of old walnut trees from outside. All of a sudden, my window opened and I could see 6 or 7 white wolves sitting on the walnut tree, completely dead. The wolves looked more like foxes and I was terrified of them. They had big fluffy tails and ears spread like dogs who were paying attention to something. To my horror, I screamed and woke up. And that was the end of my dream. I was terrified that they were going to eat me.
Wow, that is some dream. But how did the dream play into Freud's psychoanalysis of you? What did he think of such dreams?
Well, Freud believed it was a result of me witnessing my parents having sex. So, although after a year of seeing Freud, he told me I was cleared.
So you no longer require therapy?
Every now and then I go to see a psychoanalysis to see other people that also follow Freud.
And I can see that you are still going through much, but hopefully you will get through this. And I believe that that is all the time we have for today. So thank you so much for coming and chatting with us.
It was my pleasure as always. Thank you for having me.
Anytime, Sarah J. And next up is a guest you won't want to miss. Stay tuned. Welcome. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us about your past professor, Sigmund Freud.
No problem. Glad to be here.
Great. Let's get started then. I'm researching Freud, and I've recently heard of the 3 parts of personality tied to his name. Could you tell me more about that?
Yes, Professor Freud divided the conscious and unconscious mind into 3 structures or systems that perform different roles. He called this the 3 parts of personality, which consisted of the ID, the ego, and the superego.
So these 3 systems work simultaneously?
Well, not exactly. Since Professor Freud viewed human beings as energy systems, only one system can be in control at any given time, while the other 2 systems give themselves over to the psychic energy of the one in control.
Oh, okay. So tell me more about each system and its purpose. Let's start with ID.
The ID is the original system of personality and the dominant one at birth. It's the core of all instincts and is infantile in the way that it manifests and functions on the unconscious level. It lacks organization and is demanding, insistent, and impulsive. Since the ID cannot tolerate tension and works to discharge it as quickly as possible, it operates according to what Freud called the pleasure principle, which wants to satisfy desires.
Very interesting. So what about the ego?
The ego works by the reality principle and is the personality structure that deals with the real world and solves the problems of life. Essentially, it governs, controls, and regulates matters of life and functions as part of the conscious mind.
Okay. So if we thought of the human personality as a form of government, the ego would be the executive branch?
Yes, exactly. And to expand upon that idea, you could refer to the superego as a judicial branch of the personality. It imposes moral code concerning itself with whether a particular action is good or bad, right or wrong. The superego strives for perfection instead of pleasure and is represented by both the conscious and unconscious mind, depending on the particular function it is serving.
That's fascinating. What this term self I've been hearing about lately, which part of the personality does that apply to?
Self is formed through the ego's efforts over time as it deals with the real world, which transforms into actual skills, competencies, and memories. In more blatant terms, self is maturity that usually begins to occur in young adults.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
I'm happy to help. Feel free to contact me if you have any other questions concerning Professor Freud.
All right, will do. Thank you. Hello, we are now welcoming our next guest, Karen Horney. Hello, how are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. So to start off, can you please tell us about your perception of Freud's theories?
Sure. Well, one of Freud's theories of his psychosexual analyses was that of penis envy, which basically asserted that women are jealous of males for their superior genitalia.
And do you believe that penises are the superior genitalia?
I don't believe this at all. In fact, through my own research of psychosexuality, I've coined the term womb envy, which basically asserts that men are actually the ones jealous of women for their reproductive abilities.
So clearly, you and Freud disagree on some of the fundamentals of psychosexuality. Can you give me the understanding of what else Freud's psychosexual analysis consisted of?
Well, Freud believed that all people, even babies, are driven by their desire to have bodily pleasure. So, for example, the first bodily pleasures that babies experience is that of sucking. So breastfeeding and sucking their thumb, that was considered the oral stage by Freud. Then babies would proceed into the anal stage where they receive their bodily pleasure from defecating. So next, people are going to demonstrate their first interest in genitalia and sexual organs, and that's called the phallic stage. So during this stage, babies will become closer to the parent of the opposite sex and develop a subtle resentment for the parent of the same sex. Then children go through a latency stage, which means that they kind of put sexuality on the back burner. But then during puberty, they re-enter that stage. It's called the genital stage, and then their bodily pleasure is directed towards that of sexual pleasure.
Fascinating. So, did Freud believe this? Why did Freud believe this was so important?
Well, he thought that if any sort of disruption occurred during these psychosexual stages, that it could completely mess up and impact that person for the rest of their life. So, for example, if during the phallic stage of childhood, if a child was not able to develop a strong connection with the parent of the opposite gender, they could develop homosexuality later in their life.
Okay, thank you for your information.
You're welcome. Bye.
Hi, Carl. Nice to have you on the show.
Thanks, it's nice to be here.
So, can you tell us about yourself?
Sure, I'm a psychologist and I work closely with Sigmund Freud. I'm also a close personal friend.
How did you guys meet?
I sent him a copy of my book when I finished it, and we just kind of became friends from that.
How did that work out?
We pretty well, because when we first met, we talked for 12 hours about our theories.
Did he influence you at all?
Yeah, I became really interested in the unconscious mind.
Can you tell me a bit about that?
The unconscious mind is like one of the three parts of a person's mind. There's unconscious, subconscious, and conscious. Conscious is everything we experience and know. Subconscious is stuff that we know but we have to think about, like a person's phone number or address. And unconscious is the biggest one, and that's stuff that we deposit there in order to save us from mental harm because they're damaging memories.
Interesting. So do you still keep in touch with Freud?
Actually, no. When I became more independent and came up with my own theories, Freud sort of cut me off.
Wow, that seems very cold. Well, thank you. That's all we have time for now.
Thank you.